It was the summer of 2000 when Lucie Blackman stepped off a plane at Narita International Airport, full of optimism and anticipation. She was just 21 years old, a young woman from Sevenoaks, Kent, in the south of England. Lucie had always been known for her striking presence, tall, blonde, and confident, with an easy charm that drew people to her. Friends described her as adventurous and spontaneous, someone who sought out new experiences and refused to settle into a predictable routine. After finishing school, Lucie had worked as a flight attendant for British Airways, a job that fed her curiosity about the world. But the long hours and constant travel left her feeling restless. And by early 2000, she was looking for a change. That's when she learned about the lucrative hostessing scene in Japan, a nightlife industry centered around bars where women entertained male customers by talking, pouring drinks, and making them feel valued. It wasn't sex work, at least not officially, and many young foreign women saw it as a way to earn good money while experiencing life abroad. Lucie and her close friend Louise Phillips decided to take the leap together. They packed their bags and left behind the familiar comforts of home, trading the quiet streets of Kent for the neon chaos of Tokyo. By May, they had arrived in the Roppongi district, a bustling nightlife hub known for its bars, clubs, and expatriate hangouts. It was a place where East met West, where Japanese businessmen mingled with foreigners, and where the line between entertainment and exploitation was often thin. The job was demanding but financially rewarding. Lucie quickly adapted to the role of a hostess, greeting customers with a warm smile, laughing at their jokes, and keeping them company over drinks. For someone as outgoing as she was, the social side came naturally. But beneath the glamorous veneer of Roppongi nightlife, there was an undercurrent of risk. Hostesses were expected to go on dohan, paid dates outside the club, and while most were harmless, they sometimes put women in vulnerable situations. It was a side of the job Lucie and Louise understood but tried not to dwell on. Despite the long hours, Lucie stayed in close contact with her family. She spoke frequently with her father, Tim Blackman, and her younger sister, Sophie. They worried about her being so far from home, but Lucie reassured them she was safe and enjoying the adventure. She promised to return home for a visit later that summer, but that promise would never be fulfilled. On July 1st, 2000, Lucie called Louise during a break from work. Her voice was cheerful and excited. She told her friend that a wealthy client she'd met recently had invited her to lunch and a drive along the coast. The man had presented himself as well-off and respectable, someone worth cultivating as a regular customer. Lucie saw no reason to be suspicious. She told Louise she'd be back later that afternoon, but Lucie never came back. At first, Louise wasn't alarmed. Maybe the lunch had gone on longer than expected. Maybe Lucie had decided to spend the evening out. But as night fell, and there was still no word, worry set in. By the next morning, Louise's concern had turned to panic. She called Lucie's phone repeatedly. No answer. She contacted their friends. No one had seen her. Finally, she reported Lucie missing. Back in England, Tim Blackman received the news that every parent dreads. He and Lucie's mother, Jane, were divorced, but united in their fear. They immediately flew to Tokyo, desperate for answers. On arrival, they were met with a frustrating reality. The Japanese police did not view Lucie's disappearance with the same urgency they did. Adult women often left voluntarily, they said. Perhaps she had gone off with a boyfriend, or decided to leave Tokyo on her own. But Tim knew his daughter. She was independent, yes, but she was also deeply connected to her family. She would never vanish without a word. He began his own investigation, handing out flyers across Roppongi, talking to anyone who might have seen her, pleading with local media to cover the case. British diplomats offered support, but the cultural and bureaucratic differences between the UK and Japan made progress agonizingly slow. Then, several days after Lucie vanished, Louise received a phone call from a man speaking in heavily accented English. He claimed Lucie had joined a religious cult and would not be returning. The call was brief and strange, and when traced, it led nowhere. But it deepened the family's dread. Something terrible had happened. They were sure of it. Tim's determination grew stronger. He spoke to anyone who would listen, appearing on Japanese television and begging for information. He offered a reward for any leads. The case began to gain international attention, and pressure mounted on the Tokyo Metropolitan Police to act. As detectives slowly pieced together Lucie's final movements, a chilling pattern began to emerge. She had last been seen getting into a car with a man, described as middle-aged, wealthy, and Japanese. Witnesses recalled that she had seemed relaxed and unconcerned. Whoever he was, she trusted him enough to leave with him. Weeks turned into months, and hope began to fade. Lucie's disappearance had captured headlines in both Japan and the United Kingdom, but there was still no sign of her. Tim remained in Tokyo, unwilling to give up. "I can't go home without Lucie," he told reporters. "I have to find her." Then, in late February 2001, 7 months after Lucie vanished, construction workers clearing a cave in Miura, a coastal area southwest of Tokyo, made a horrifying discovery. Inside a makeshift concrete chamber, they found the dismembered remains of a young woman. Dental records confirmed what everyone had feared. It was Lucie Blackman. The news shattered her family. "It's the worst possible outcome," Tim said quietly to the press. "We wanted her back alive. Now we just want justice." The investigation shifted from a missing person case to a murder inquiry. Detectives focused their attention on a man who had emerged as a prime suspect early on. Joji Obara, a wealthy real estate developer with a dark and deeply disturbing history. Obara was known in Roppongi circles as eccentric and reclusive. He was wealthy but had few close friends. He lived in an upscale apartment building and drove luxury cars. To many, he seemed harmless, just another rich man who enjoyed the company of hostesses. But behind closed doors, Obara harbored monstrous secrets. As investigators delved deeper, they discovered a chilling pattern of behavior stretching back over a decade. Obara had been accused, though never convicted, of drugging and raping multiple women, many of them foreign hostesses. In 1992, a young Australian woman named Carita Ridgway had died after falling mysteriously ill following a date with him. Her death had been ruled accidental at the time, but police now suspected foul play. When investigators searched Obara's home, what they found was sickening. Hidden in a storage space were hundreds of videotapes, many showing unconscious women being sexually assaulted. In his journals, Obara had documented his attacks in cold, methodical detail, referring to his victims as conquests. The scope of his crimes was staggering. Obara was arrested and charged with multiple counts of rape and manslaughter, including charges related to Carita Ridgway's death. But the case involving Lucie Blackman presented unique challenges. While the evidence strongly pointed to Obara's involvement, crucial forensic details had been destroyed. The decomposition of Lucie's remains and the manner in which they had been hidden made it nearly impossible to determine the exact cause of death. Still, prosecutors were determined to seek justice. They built their case around Obara's pattern of behavior, the similarities between Lucie's disappearance and his prior assaults, and circumstantial evidence tying him to the location where her body was found. The trial would become one of the most closely watched in Japanese legal history. For Lucie's family, the wait for justice was excruciating. Tim Blackman attended nearly every session of the lengthy proceedings, enduring the details of Obara's predatory actions and the legal arguments that often seemed to overlook the human cost. At times, he grew frustrated with the Japanese legal system, which required prosecutors to prove not just that Obara had harmed Lucie, but exactly how he had caused her death. "It feels like Lucie is being forgotten in all this," he said to journalists outside the courtroom. "But I will never stop fighting for her." The trial of Joji Obara was unlike anything Japan had seen in recent years. It was sprawling, intricate, and deeply disturbing. Not just a case about one victim, but a reckoning with a man accused of terrorizing dozens. Prosecutors meticulously laid out the evidence, the videotapes, the journals, the testimonies of women who had survived encounters with him. They described how Obara had cultivated a method of predation that relied on charm, wealth, and trust, a system that allowed him to lure women into situations where they were vulnerable, then exploit them without fear of consequence. For many, the most haunting detail was the sheer number of victims. It was not a matter of isolated incidents, but a pattern that stretched back more than a decade. One by one, women came forward to testify, their stories chillingly similar. Obara would offer them drinks laced with powerful sedatives, rendering them unconscious. Hours later, they would awaken confused, disoriented, and violated. Some reported strange physical symptoms: nausea, dizziness, memory loss. Many had been too ashamed or afraid to go to the police. Others had tried and been dismissed. The most damning evidence came from the tapes seized from Obara's apartment. Hundreds of hours of footage showing him assaulting unconscious women. None of the tapes showed Lucie Blackman, but the pattern was undeniable. Prosecutors argued that Lucie, too, had fallen victim to the same predatory behavior. But proving murder was far more difficult. The condition of Lucie's remains, dismembered and hidden in a concrete chamber, made it impossible to determine her cause of death. There was no clear evidence of how she had died, and without that, the prosecution's case rested heavily on circumstantial evidence and Obara's established pattern of behavior. The defense seized on this weakness. Obara's lawyers argued that while their client might be guilty of sexual assault in other cases, there was no proof he had killed Lucie Blackman. They suggested alternative scenarios. Perhaps Lucie had suffered an accidental overdose, or perhaps someone else was responsible for her death. Without forensic proof, they said, the court could not convict him of murder. The legal battle was slow and grueling. Japan's judicial system operates differently from those in the West, with trials unfolding over many months or even years. Hearings were often spaced weeks apart, and each session was dense with technical arguments, forensic reports, and witness testimony. For Lucie's family, the process was agonizing. Tim Blackman sat quietly through most of the proceedings, his expression a mix of grief and determination. Occasionally, he would glance at Obara, a man who rarely showed emotion, who sat expressionless as the most horrifying details of his crimes were recounted. Tim wondered what kind of person could do such things and feel nothing. When asked by reporters how he felt, Tim's answers were measured but heartfelt. "It's very hard to sit there and listen," he said once outside the courthouse. "But Lucie deserves for us to see this through. She deserves for the truth to be told." The media coverage was relentless. British and Japanese outlets followed the trial closely, broadcasting updates on every development. The public reaction in Japan was complex. There was horror at the scale of Obara's crimes, but also discomfort at the way the case exposed shortcomings in how the system handled sexual violence, particularly against foreign women. Many began to question how a man like Obara could have operated for so long without serious consequences. The trial also brought renewed scrutiny to the hostess industry. Some commentators suggested that Lucie and other foreign women bore some responsibility for putting themselves in vulnerable situations. The Blackman family and their supporters pushed back forcefully against such narratives. Lucie had been working legally and doing nothing wrong. The blame, they insisted, lay solely with the man who had exploited and killed her. As the trial approached its conclusion, anticipation and anxiety mounted. After years of waiting, the Blackman family hoped for a verdict that would bring some measure of justice, but nothing could prepare them for what came next. In April 2007, nearly 7 years after Lucie vanished, the Tokyo District Court delivered its judgment. Joji Obara was found guilty of multiple counts of sexual assault and of raping and causing the death of Carita Ridgway in 1992. For those crimes, he was sentenced to life imprisonment. But in a devastating blow to Lucie's family, the court acquitted Obara of charges directly related to her death. The judges ruled that there was insufficient evidence to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Obara had caused Lucie's death, even though they acknowledged he had dismembered and disposed of her body. The courtroom fell silent as the verdict was read. Tim Blackman sat still, his hands folded tightly in his lap. Later, speaking to the press, his voice was heavy with disappointment. "Today's verdict is not justice for Lucie," he said. "It's not justice for our family. And it's not justice for the many women whose lives were destroyed by this man." The decision sparked outrage in both Japan and the UK. Critics accused the Japanese legal system of failing Lucie and her family, of allowing a dangerous predator to evade full accountability. Newspapers in Britain called the verdict a travesty. Even in Japan, commentators questioned whether the system's emphasis on incontrovertible forensic evidence had blinded it to the broader truth. But the fight wasn't over. Prosecutors appealed the ruling, and in December 2008, the Tokyo High Court delivered a partial reversal. It found Obara guilty of dismembering and abandoning Lucie Blackman's body, though still not of her murder. The life sentence remained in place, but the ruling did little to ease the Blackman family's grief. The man they believed had killed their daughter was in prison, but not for the crime that had taken her life. For Tim, the appeal decision was bittersweet. "It's a small step," he told reporters, "but it's not enough. Lucie deserved better." The case continued to reverberate long after the final verdict. It forced a reckoning with how Japan handled sexual assault and crimes against foreign nationals. It exposed the vulnerabilities faced by women working in the hostess industry and highlighted the need for better cooperation between law enforcement agencies across borders. Tim Blackman became an outspoken advocate for change. He met with British officials to discuss ways to better protect citizens abroad and worked with organizations supporting victims of sexual violence. He spoke openly about Lucie's story, not just as a cautionary tale, but as a call to action. "Lucie was not just a victim," he said in one interview. "She was a daughter, a sister, a friend. She had dreams and ambitions, and she had a light that touched everyone who knew her. That's what we want people to remember, not how she died, but how she lived." In Japan, too, the case left a lasting mark. Hostess clubs faced greater scrutiny, and police pledged to improve their handling of sexual assault cases. While progress was slow and uneven, Lucie's story had sparked a conversation that could not be ignored. Years passed, but the Blackman family's pain never fully healed. They returned to Japan several times, visiting the site where Lucie's remains were found, leaving flowers and messages of love. Sophie Blackman, Lucie's younger sister, spoke publicly about the hole her sister's absence had left in their lives. "There isn't a day that goes by that we don't think about her," she said. "She was our light, and we miss her every single day." The media eventually moved on to other stories, but Lucie's name never disappeared entirely. Documentaries, books, and investigative reports continued to revisit her case, examining not just the crime itself, but the cultural and legal dynamics that had shaped its outcome. Her story became a touchstone in discussions about women's safety, justice, and the complexities of cross-cultural crime investigations. One of the most significant outcomes of the case was the creation of the Lucie Blackman Trust, a charity established by her father in her memory. Its mission was to support British nationals who became victims of crime abroad, offering assistance, advocacy, and resources to families navigating unfamiliar legal systems. Through the trust, Lucie's legacy became one of action, transforming personal tragedy into a force for change. "She would have wanted us to help others," Tim said when the charity was launched. If something good can come from this nightmare, if one family can be spared the confusion and despair we went through, then Lucie's spirit lives on. The story of Lucie Blackman is not just a story of a crime. It is a story about trust and betrayal, about the vulnerabilities that exist in a world where predators hide in plain sight. It is a story about a family's unwavering determination in the face of unimaginable loss and a father's refusal to let his daughter be forgotten. Even now, more than 2 decades later, her name evokes both sorrow and resolve. Sorrow for a life stolen too soon, resolve to demand better, from systems, from institutions, from societies that too often fail those who need them most. Lucie Blackman was 21 years old when she died. She was vibrant, curious, and full of life. She was loved deeply by her family and friends, and though her story ended in tragedy, her legacy endures, not just in the memories of those who knew her, but in the countless lives touched by the movement for justice her case inspired. Her story is a reminder that behind every headline is a person, a life with hopes, dreams, and people who loved them. It is a reminder that justice is not always swift or complete, but that the pursuit of it matters deeply. And it is a reminder that even in the darkest moments, love and memory have the power to light the way forward. Tell us your thought in the comments section. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because here at True Crime C8D, we tell the stories you'll never forget. Remember to decease from crime, 'cause crime don't pay.